around 3:30, so I'm going to get us started as our panel and our guest visitor are on a schedule for this afternoon, and I want to honor that time. So I just came from a professional development session in the library media classroom or the library with some of our staff at Lexington High School. Had a chance to meet with Amanda Bickerstaff from AI for Education and to learn some of the basics about things like ChatGPT and Claude AI and these language learning models that are out there and what the potential uses are, but also what some of the limitations and biases of them are and what we should be careful about in using them as educators and students. And it was exciting on a Friday afternoon to end our week that way. And now we are transitioning into a forum, which is probably going to focus a lot more on the caregiver and student side than the staff side that we were on. And we have some staff and students and Amanda meeting here with us this afternoon. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Andrew Baker. I'm the principal of Lexington High School, and to my right is Daniel Mia. He's the associate principal. And we have been working with our parent-teacher organization and the LEF. I really want to thank them to bring in some professional development and a forum on AI and education to the Lexington Public Schools. We were joined by staff from the middle schools and some of the other schools this afternoon. So this was really meant to be a resource across our community to teachers in other schools and also to our parents, caregivers, and students. So once again, I really want to thank our PTO, and I want to thank the LEF who helped to fund and make this happen this afternoon. As you can see, Daniel and I have gotten very fond of Mentimeter. Nary has been the week recently that there hasn't been a Mentimeter at some point in our lives. And so if you could go to menti.com and type in the code 3136-5437 on your phone, we do have a couple of questions we want to ask you before I turn it over to the panel so that the panel can understand who we have here today. So I'm going to give you a moment to log on to Menti. And then once you're there, the first question is just to ask you your role. Oh, the code one more time. Mr. Milia is 3136-5437. Okay. One category is dominating. Panel. There are a lot of parents and caregivers here this afternoon who want to hear from you in their role as parents and caregivers, although I see maybe some future Lexington High School students out in the crowd. All right, second question. Oh, look, people have already skipped ahead. How familiar, adept are you with these large language learning models like ChatGPT or Claude AI? Are you an expert? You use it all the time and you use it well. Are you familiar? You've played around with it, but you're not a pro. Or what's ChatGPT? Because I'm too afraid to ask at this point and everybody else seems to know. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of people who have maybe experimented here and there, but they would not consider themselves experts, and maybe a couple of novices. We have a few experts, yeah. Well, Amanda's here, so I would hope we would have at least one expert. All right, please rank order. So this would have been an interesting one to do with the staff this afternoon. What you think of as the least to most appropriate uses of artificial intelligence, and our options are generating ideas for a lesson plan, generating ideas for writing, writing computer code, writing a lesson plan, a short composition, a long essay, or writing an anniversary card message to your partner of 25 years. Yes, that's fine. Just so you know, that last example was the former principal of Lexington High School, Andrew Stevens, wrote his anniversary card on ChatGPT. I watched him do it, and I heard the message was well received. It was considered more loving than many other messages, more authentic than other messages that he had written in the past. So I'll give you a couple of moments. We learned this afternoon, I hope I'm not blowing up your spot, Amanda, but that 40% of the traffic on GPT is actually around writing code. So the idea that it's mostly around writing essays is not in fact accurate. Okay, so what I'm seeing there is probably actually a big takeaway from this afternoon's professional development, which is that these tools are really great ways of brainstorming and generating ideas and getting ideas going. They might not get you to the finish line, but they might really help you out at the starting line. Okay, this one is a word cloud. What excites you about this technology? We have words like innovate, versatility, anti-writer's block, quick, idea generation, generating options, data comparison. That's interesting. I hadn't seen that. Easy to use. That's an interesting one from having gone to the professional development this afternoon. I would say easy to use, maybe hard to use well. That's what we learned this afternoon, that to use it really well is harder. All right, Mr. Millian. What scares you or gives you pause about these language learning models and AI? Yeah. All right, so I'm seeing concerns about lack of critical thinking or curbing learning or critical thinking skills. I'm seeing things about bias and misinformation. We learned about that this afternoon in our professional development, that these large language learning models are really only as good as the information that went into them. And if the information is biased, it's going to come out biased. And that's something that we learned. Interesting. So I think that there might be some things to say about this one. I had a conversation with Ms. Conlon, who I see sitting over there at one point during the PD today, and we were talking about how maybe even to use it well, you needed to be able to do some critical thinking in order to use it well. And so maybe our fear around critical thinking isn't quite as founded. Did we ask anything else in the Mentimeter? We did. So this one you won't see. But if at any point you have a question you would like to put to the panel, we will collect them. And the way that this is going to work is I'm going to hand this over to our guests first, to Amanda Bickerstaff from AI for Education to present some information and some insights. And then we have faculty members and students who have experience with the technology. They're going to tell you about their experience. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A. Okay?
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Awesome. Again, we're asking a lot. It's Friday afternoon and it's very cold outside, so thank you for being here. I'm Amanda Bickerstaff. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI for Education. We're focused fully on the responsible adoption of AI and the education ecosystem, and I'm very lucky. I get to work with schools and systems across the world. We've now done work in 6 countries, as well as across the United States. We also are one of the first organizations focused on this moment in time, so our resources are part of things like the North Carolina State Guidance that just came out on generative AI use. We're heavily cited. So we do a lot of work, not just with teachers and also students. I get to teach some students every once in a while as well. But also we get to create frameworks for responsible use. So what was really interesting in the Mentimeter is that we asked about the 2 questions about the word cloud. One was about risks and one was not. And guess what? Some of the answers were the same. So I think we have a lot of concerns, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of questions because we should. This is a brand new technology that is transforming the way we work, the way we think, the way we interact with school. And so it's really important to have these moments today. I see a young man in the back who looks a little bit bored. That's okay, not to call you out. But like, for example, what grade is he? Eighth grade. So the world in which, eighth grade, he starts to get out. If you have a sixth grader or a fifth grader, what grade are you in? Fourth grade. Okay, lives will be very different. Education will be very different. Work will be very different. And so it's whether you have a high schooler right now or you have a younger student, it's important for you to be here with us today and to start building some common understanding. I'm here to tell you AI is not only for cheating. I know we think it is not. And also we see all over and over again, we're going to talk to, that's why I actually asked for student panelists, because I think I can say that, but when you talk to students, I think you'll listen to it a little bit differently. Do you mind going to the next, the first slide? I think just go down as a PDF. There we go. So we did this today. So I had the pleasure of working with Pat and Carrie and others about artificial intelligence. Who has their phone with you right now? Or who is on it? Guess what? You're using AI right now. So 84% of us use AI every single day. If you own a cell phone or you own a computer, a laptop, you're interacting with artificial intelligence. So we talked about it earlier, Carrie and Pat. What are some common AI tools in our phones? Spotify, or Discover Weekly, it remembers what you like. Face recognition, your biometric signature. What else? Putting them on the spot. Yeah. What do you think is AI? Yeah. Google search engine, absolutely. Voice assistants like Siri, Alexa. If I say, hey Siri, I'm sorry I turned on your phones. You know what? I'm looking for those snow boots. They're going to follow me everywhere. I'm going back to New York where it is snowing right now. So we interact with artificial intelligence literally every day. 84% of people in the world interact with AI all the time. And what we need to recognize is that while we are talking about AI today, and it's everywhere, it has been a part of our lives since the 50s. The first chatbot was in the 1960s, and we have seen artificial intelligence become more and more common. And so what I want to do is take this time and step back. This has not come from nowhere. It might feel like it because ChatGPT is literally everywhere, but it's not new. It is a field we've been trying. Even Socrates talked about machines that could think back, a couple thousand years ago. So this has been a thing we've been trying to do for a really long time. But what's happened is we have a move towards generative AI, which we're going to talk about today. So when we talk about policies and the way that we think about this and the way your students use it, if you told your kid you cannot use AI for a lesson, then it means you cannot use predictive text, spell check, research on search engines. Those are all artificial intelligence. So specificity of language is really important for this moment in time. What we're talking about instead is generative AI. So ChatGPT, Bard, if you use Bard, or Bing, are all going to be examples of generative AI. What happens is you have a new tool that takes all kinds of training data, like the internet, and what it does is it creates a model that you can ask it questions, and it creates something for the first time ever. And we did this together today, but it can do code. We talked about that, so new technology. It can do words like essays. It can do images. It can do video, and it's going to be able to do more and more as it advances. But it's just very important for us to understand it's not brand new, okay? But it is very different. And so if we can go to the next slide. We have some really, really stark moves forward. Like it's gone much faster. So we've been trying to approximate human-like interactions for a long time. And so we start with like handwriting recognition. I have really bad handwriting. I'm guessing, even though it's human parody, that I still can't read my handwriting. But that started in the 1990s, late 1990s. You've then got speech recognition. You've got image recognition. And some of these took almost 2 decades to get to human parody or better. But then what do we see happen? 2016 and beyond, we see this amazing uptick in growth. So for example, reading comprehension, language understanding, common sense completion, code generation, high school and college subjects. And what you're going to notice is it's gone much, much faster. And the reason being is that computing has gotten much, much better. And so we have this conversation because of compute power going up so quickly and these new models being able to do things like never before. So when we think about ChatGPT, one of the best examples that I've heard about how to think about it is it's like a calculator for the humanities. So it can do things like write an essay. It can create questions. It can help you meal plan. Who wants to go on a trip? Who would like to be less cold right now? You can use it to help you plan a trip. There are all kinds of opportunities that you can use this. And all of it is possible because of the real increase in compute power and new technology. And that's why we're talking about it today. Next slide, please. So I have this cute little, this is our little AI for Education year-end ChatGPT. So ChatGPT was first launched in November of 2022. Did anybody use it back then? I'm about to say, I knew it was you. Pat, did you use it? Checking out, knew about it. I was in Japan, burnt out like crazy. I was not using it. But this is something that came into the world. And it was something in which OpenAI is a company that developed this tool. And they had this generative AI tool. Does anybody love Jeopardy? Like Jeopardy? Oh gosh, no, we hate Jeopardy. Do you remember IBM Watson beating Jeopardy? It's like 2016. Yes. So that is generative AI. That's what we're talking about today. But it can only do one thing pretty well, which is beat Jeopardy. And now what we have is that, but it can create Jeopardy. It can actually create a Jeopardy game for you. That's how it's changed. And so what we have is the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022. We see immediately, I live in New York City, and I was a New York City teacher. New York City banned ChatGPT immediately. like 1 month later, no more. And actually, I will tell you today, it is still essentially banned. Every school has to turn it on for it to be used. So it's still, a lot of places, it's still banned. We see things like Khan Academy. Has anybody used Conmigo? Has any student here used Conmigo, or a teacher or a parent? So Conmigo happened very quickly. In fact, literally the day after GPT-4 was released, which is the best model on the market. It is the one that's paid, but it is remarkably better than anything else on the market. It happened almost immediately. And so we see a really fast application in education. But we also start to see things like, UNESCO survey in June, only 7% of schools have a policy in place, 13% of colleges around appropriate use of generative AI. I hate to tell you, this is not much larger today. 6 months later, I think it's probably about 15%, maybe. That is being generous. So we're very slow to respond because this technology is so new. It's not even clear what is appropriate use yet. We're going to talk about that with you guys today. Another thing I'd like to put, it's so funny. Okay, so ChatGPT actually has only had one decline in users, only once. And it was in July. And does anybody know why? School is out. This is real. It went back. People were like, oh, the hype cycle's over. ChatGPT is dying. No, it was kids were out of school. And so we're teachers, because those are two common use cases. The next thing I want to say is, we talked about this today. AI detection tools do not work. And in fact, if OpenAI actually had its own AI detection tool about catching ChatGPT's output, they closed it down. So there is no magic bullet. My parents in here, I'm so sorry. My teachers even more. There is no magic bullet for being able to detect AI, okay? And in fact, the most recent research suggests that by 2026, 90% of all data on the internet will be synthetic, meaning that it will be no longer human generated. So this is happening fast, guys. So we have that, and we have all of these different pieces. We have all these kind of places, but realistically, we're still very, very new in this piece. In fact, right now, today, the 6th guidance from a state on generative AI came out. We're talking a full year once it's been released. Okay, next slide, please. So also, we talked about our 4th grader and 8th grader who I called out, I am so mean, I am sorry, is that there is an enormous impact, not just in schools. And so as parents, I think sometimes, and teachers and students, we can be a bit frustrated that schools can move a little bit slowly. We just talked about that. But this is not a school problem. This is a world problem. It's in every industry. It's impacting every industry in meaningful ways. So for example, in August, there was a report on the impact of industry. A third of companies were already using it. 40% of all respondents said that skills would be really deeply impacted. And 60% of tasks could be automated by generative AI. The IMF came out with a piece this week that says that up to 70% of American jobs are at risk of AI adoption and impact. 40% globally, 26% in the global south, but 70% in the US. So it is coming again very quickly. And the majority of these usually we think about automation, it's factory workers, it's service workers that are impacted. Generative AI impacts skill workers and white collar jobs. And these jobs are primarily held by women and people of color. So we think a lot about equity. It's very, very important to understand this right now in the work that you're doing. One of the things we don't want to happen is after this conversation, our minds are still shut to the possibilities of teaching students, your kids, how to use these tools, because you might want to ignore AI. It is not ignoring you. It's definitely not ignoring your students. It is not ignoring the place in which these kids, no, I do not want to be bleak, but this, the world that you guys are going to do, it's going to be amazing and innovative. We saw innovation up there as a positive around generative AI, and that is real. But also it's a place that's significantly going to change every day. Next slide. So we talked about AI is for cheating. Here's a great example of how it's actually being used. And it doesn't mean that we don't have students. I don't know. Who is willing to admit as a young person that you have used AI? Who has used Snapchat AI in here? Anybody willing to talk about it? Never used Snapchat AI? Meta? Instagram? You ever talked to Kylie Jenner? Well, I'll tell you, 40% of students in the UK between 7 and 12 have used Snapchat AI. And that's been out since almost a year. So what we see is that about 60% of students, probably it's increasing every day, have used generative AI. Many use it for personal use. So things like meal planning, trip planning, relationship advice. Have you guys used character AI? Still no. Okay, character AI is, oh, there we go, yes. Character AI is a way you can talk to 18 million avatars, including like Socrates. Like that's an opportunity. We see that more and more students are using it for school use, but I will tell you that I have been in schools where everyone's using it, and that is not the case. It is uneven at every level. But then the highest use case was kids that actually had special needs. Those with IEPs and special needs were using it the most. And this is in 2 different studies now, because it can, I have ChatGPT. You guys have ChatGPT on your phone? No, still no. We need to work on this, call and answer. No. But maybe you should now, because you can actually talk to it. You never even have to type. If you're dyslexic, if you have problems with attention, you can talk to it and it'll talk back to you. So there are opportunities. In fact, GPT-4 has a way to upload an image and it'll talk to you about what it is. It was first used with people that are low to no vision. So there's some really great opportunities, and it is an awesome way to collapse some of the complexity of school for some students. Okay, does anybody feel like this? I mean, I do, and this is my job. It does feel like sometimes we're drinking through a fire hose. And the fact I just asked you, I just said a bunch of things, you're like, no. And these are kids that are asked to do this panel. So this is something that's really interesting. And I want to tell you right now, I am not asking you to be experts. We're not asking you to be experts about AI, but we are asking you to start thinking about it as something that is not just this bad or evil or even the best thing that ever happened, but actually something that is really deeply transformational and extremely weird and cool and strange. And it's something that can be very impactful, not only to your students' lives, but yours as well. And so I really want us to come away from this. If I can do anything today is just lower the uncertainty principle. Let's go down a little bit and let's have a conversation about this new technology. Let's think about its applications and get away from, oh, I can't keep up, or it's only for cheating, or what's going to happen next, but more into things of what can we do to start upskilling our students to use these tools ethically and effectively to actually drive better learning and to drive creativity in ways that have never been possible before. Next slide. Okay, last 2 pieces, and then we're going to hand it over to the piece. There's some really cool opportunities for the people on this panel. Is anybody else a teacher in the audience? Okay, awesome. So there's some cool things around automating admin. Teachers spend on average up to 10 hours a week doing non-teaching stuff. It could be more during COVID. So when you think about, oh, teachers have it easy. I'm also a former teacher, so I feel that very uniquely. But it can help you with automating admin. So today we did things like lesson planning, differentiation, responding to an email. Has anybody in here ever sent an angry email to a teacher? Maybe. Has anybody ever not gotten an answer? Well, one of the reasons why you don't get an answer is sometimes you just don't have the ability to answer, right? The teachers are really stressed out. They have a lot going on. And so it could almost like stay and then it's too long to answer. Being able to have a brainstorming partner to actually have a good response that's thoughtful, practical, professional is a great way to continue a great relationship with us, right? Like I can do a better job. And so there are all kinds of awesome opportunities to lower this really huge cognitive load on teachers that keeps them for what matters, which is the interaction with these three and the kids in the audience. It can be a great thought partner. I know that we talked about that. Like it's just, it never gets bored. It doesn't think you're dumb. Doesn't think anything really because it's not thinking. But what it does is it's a great way to like, if you have ideas or you get really creative, I want to take this one lesson and I want to go crazy. It gives you the opportunity to do that. And the last is that more and more we're going to start to see tools that are designed specifically for educators and specifically even for Lexington High School. In the next year or 2 years, we're going to see actual tools that are very easy to do that can have all the curriculum across this school. And it can have a student be able to ask it questions directly to the curriculum or a teacher getting better lesson plans that are standard aligned. So while that's not today, that is coming. Next, for students like these guys and out in there in the audience, is one of the first things that's so cool is personalized learning. So I have an example. We had the last panel I did with students. I had a student that was doing an economics class and was having trouble with a topic, and he asked it to explain it to him in bananas instead of money. And you know what? He got it. Like it made it crystallize for him. It also made it a little bit weird, and he paid more attention. He learned about this thing. So personalized learning is a great opportunity. One of the best things that ChatGPT can do is explain it to you in the way that you need. So do I need it in, give me examples, real world explanations? It needs to be something that has 3 different ways. Teach it to me in 3 ways because I just need it to be repetitive. It's an awesome opportunity. More and more intelligent tutoring is going to be a part of the things. I'll be honest, I don't think Conmigo is intelligent tutoring yet, but we're going that way where students will have a one-on-one tutor to help them learn. It's also a thought partner. It could also, if you want, you want to build something crazy or a new project idea and you're stuck, or you have a competition. Let's say students, do you guys do competitions at all? Again, no, man. Someone does? Yes. Yes. Okay. Did I get a yes? Yeah. Okay. But competitions, like even brainstorming ideas to help you think deeper, like that's all possible now. And then we talked about accessibility, like helping students, like. I don't know anybody in here that procrastinates ever. Not that we procrastinate, but maybe sometimes we just never get started because we don't know how to get started. And this is a great opportunity to help with that. So the last thing I'll talk about before we move on is we talk about responsible adoption. That means balance. This technology is the newest. It's the worst it'll ever be today, the worst it ever was tomorrow, and the worst it'll ever be tomorrow. And the reason why is that it's such a new technology. This is brand new. Does anybody remember Facebook when it first launched? The 4th grader. Yeah, love it. It's like old people use it. So Facebook wasn't very good when it first started. What about Google search or other technologies? Even your cell phone. Who remembers an iPod? Big iPod and like, oh yeah, I loved an iPod. But sometimes it wouldn't work, it wouldn't upload, it had limited capacity. These are new technologies. They're not always going to work. So there are 3 really strong limitations that you all need to be aware of as adults that are working with your kids. One is that they have limited knowledge bases, and we talked a lot about that today. So if you're going to be using these tools as a student or even as an adult, you need to be aware that it isn't connected to the internet. ChatGPT 3.5 is not connected to the internet, nor is Claude. So it also has a limited knowledge base, so the knowledge cutoff stops. So it doesn't know current events if something has changed. So you need to be careful. So if you're a student using it and you're not an expert in the thing, you better double check that quote, that fact, that figure, that time, okay? Over there, check your work. Second is bias and training data. So ChatGPT was trained on the internet. Has anybody ever said the internet was an unbiased place? No. Okay, and so we have biases. We have global north biases, American biases, English language biases. We have biases in terms of gender, ethnicity, all the things, all the isms, okay? So you have to be careful because students, you might be replicating biases in the work that you submit, but also it could be something that could be biased against you. So it's something we have to be considerate of. And the last thing is it's prone to hallucinations. And this is not the fun thing. This is just when we have the technology is not thinking, it is computing, and it's always hallucinating. It's always making things up. But when it gets it wrong, we call it a hallucination. So for example, if it makes up a statement about, Lexington High School's history, for example, and it gets it wrong, it doesn't know what the right answer is, if that makes sense. These large language models are just approximating what it thinks is right based on its training data and what you ask it. So you have to be careful. Again, critical use of these tools, right? Also, I will tell you, if you're an adult using these, we've had lawyers, doctors, academics all be sued, fined, etc., for using these tools and missing hallucinations. So literally, there are academics in Australia right now being sued by KPMG because they asked Bard to give it legal cases against KPMG, submitted it in a paper. 4 of them were made up. 4. And now KPMG, which is like $1 billion company, is suing 4 random academics in Australia. So important for us to understand. But the reason I want to kind of bring us back, first of all, we're going to go to the panel. If you want to learn more, please reach out to me. We'll have time. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody's on LinkedIn, I'm very on LinkedIn. But we have resources, all kinds of great stuff. We're going to be launching some student courses. We'll have some parent materials as well. But I wanted the same kind of piece I give for our teachers and our students as we go. First of all, this is a safe space, everybody. Can everyone say it's a safe space for these students? Okay, so we can talk about it in a real way, right? You guys feel good? That's number 1. Number 2 is let's be open-minded. Let's actually the ultimate goal of this is that no one has the right answer, including me. But it is an opportunity to learn together, to ask questions. And we're a safe space as well. There's not a dumb question, okay? If you want to know anything, ask me or ask us, okay? Everybody good? Cool. We're going to go over to the panel. You guys ready? We're going to do just yelling. We're just going to talk loudly, right? We'll have to pass the mic. Okay, really quickly, do you guys want to just pass and
introduce ourselves?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Carrie Conlon. Thank you all for coming. I teach English at the high school.
Hi, I'm Pat Flynn. Thanks for showing up. I teach history here at the high school, 10th grade, and these are 2 of my students from last year, and they are very excellent.
Hi, I'm Tara Pai. I'm a junior at Lexington High School.
Hi, I'm Nikki Prasad. I'm also a junior at Lexington High School.
I'm Srivatsan Ramanujam, and I'm a senior at Lexington High School.
So why don't we start down there? Thank you.
Okay.
And let's just talk about a little bit about what you think of ChatGPT. How has it changed the way that you do schoolwork, or what do you think? What is the impact of ChatGPT on you as a young person?
For me, it hasn't really changed all that much. Sometimes I use it from time to time if I really don't understand a physics concept that I need to understand for the test tomorrow. But mostly I use it for things in robotics where I have to find out documentation that's kind of vague online, and maybe there's use cases online, and ChatGPT can basically compile all those use cases, and it can give it to me in an easy to read format, and that way I can actually code without having to go through all these hoops and hurdles.
So both Tara and I, we actually haven't really used ChatGPT except for this one time in our English class where we were required to. But for me, I've mostly just seen my classmates around me who have been using it or who've just experimented with it. And I feel like in their eyes, it's sort of a way for them to sort of understand concepts that they weren't really understanding in school, or there's a lot of fear that they're not good enough in school, so they want to sort of better their work. So that's how I've seen it.
Yeah, like Nikki was saying, I haven't used ChatGPT that often in my own work, but I have seen my peers use it. And one major use case that I've noticed is when my friends find the work that they're doing to be annoying or stupid, and they're like, what's the point of this assignment? So they're like, I'm just going to use ChatGPT because this assignment doesn't matter and I don't care. So they use ChatGPT to complete their work because then they feel like they can focus on the assignments that actually matter to them. and submit their own work for that. So that's one major use case that I've seen alongside what Nikki has mentioned.
Awesome. Okay, now to the teachers. Impact on you, but also like maybe the response as well.
In terms of just like how I've been using it, or
What do you think the impact of ChatGPT has been on like your life as a teacher as a whole?
sure, I think it's probably pretty big. Just at this point, it's so new. That timeline was amazing. Just starting in November of last year, just how much has changed so fast. The first thing that was really striking for me, I have a little bit of a musical background, but I saw AI create a Drake song that some had said was better than any actual Drake song, and the public really seemed to like it. And I thought, I wow, and I thought that was representative of the fact that this is pretty huge. So I started playing around with it and just having kind of fun with it, like create a conversation between Karl Marx and Barack Obama, and, on the subject of what's the best cheese, like anything. And it would, like, the more specific I got with it, the more interesting it would produce. And I was like, wow. Then I very quickly started thinking about how my students are going to be using it. And I also very quickly saw how my students were pretending to not use it, but using it very dubious ways. And I wanted to take a slightly more optimistic side while also being skeptical. And in trying to be more optimistic while also understanding the great biases and the problems that are going to be coming with it, I started thinking about my own classroom and the moments in learning that seem to feel the most meaningful, and that is usually in discussion. Because we are all, there's 25 kids in the room, and I don't think AI can really replace that, what it means to be a human amongst humans and have another human being say something, and then you need to respond. And I thought about how this is, it's hard to have discussions when you don't know anything. And oftentimes the kind of information presentation stuff feels like it doesn't matter. I will say it does matter, because the discussions can't really go too far if you don't know anything, but it's also quite boring sometimes when you just have to take in information. And I don't mean to be too long-winded, but like as educators, the most important thing for us is really feedback, because we know how helpful it is for people just to get feedback. And the more instantaneous it is, the better it is. And, so for me, I look at AI as something, or GPT as something I think you called it intelligent tutoring, as a really great potential tool for getting that quick and immediate feedback to build the base level of understanding that you need to have more meaningful human experiences. And I don't know, I envision a day where, like, the classroom feels more like a gym, but instead of lifting weights, we're really working on the listening skills and embracing slowness and what it means to really disagree with someone, and so that we can apply the information that we have been building with the tool that gives us immediate feedback. Oh, it wasn't, the Bolshevik Revolution happened in 1917, and it's actually helpful for you to understand that. Here's why. It's amazing how quickly the feedback can be there, and I could never replicate that. And so I've really kind of begun a lot of questioning about what is the value of the take-home essay? I want people to have organized minds, and I see those types of assignments useful for that. But I don't know. I think it could. I'm. It's not really fundamentally altering my classroom just yet, but it is making me think a little bit differently about what it means to be in a room full of 25 people, where we have the great potential to really practice these skills of listening and reasoning and expressing our ideas carefully. But again, I don't think you can really do that without some of the boring stuff. These kids were great to have class, and Sri, I haven't seen Sri in a long time, so it's good to see you. Your hair has grown, but like really, I one thing we would have these historical significance debates in our classes, and that really is where it felt most alive. And you're hearing somebody, you're debating, and you're also applying information to an analytical framework. It's like the best things that we could do, but like because of the time that we sometimes have to spend kind of like building the information, we lose those opportunities, which is, there's 25 people in the room, and it's a great. Why are we all together? Anyway, that's my current thought.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I'm not going to probably say as much, but that's all right. No, he's captured a lot of thoughts that I have as well. Teaching English, this has really rocked my world it feels like a seismic change in the way English is going to be taught and how it's going to, what sorts of skills it's going to focus on. And like you said, like the schools, colleges, no one has caught up to what this tool can do and what it means. And I'm like lying awake at night thinking about the future of the essay. Is it real? Are we going to believe anything we read? These are some of the concerns that I have. I mean,
The thoughts of an ELA teacher right now.
yeah, I know. I mean, it's a little bit of like a crisis of confidence or something. It's not that. It's some kind of
It's an existential question.
yes, that's right. That's the word, existential crisis. So, one of the things I just read, this article made the rounds among teachers in the English department that college essays are being read by AI nowadays. And so what does that mean? Like, if the essay is generated in part by the bot, and then the bot is the reader of the essay, it's like the tree in the woods. Did it fall? Does this essay exist? So it is a little, I'm a little confused by what it means for the act of composition, period. Like that's kind of where I am. And so one place where I really agree with you, Mr. Flynn, and this is being talked about in the English department too, is maybe this shifts our focus, long game, from the mechanics and the structures of how we write to ideas themselves, and we do more work in the room generating those ideas and testing those ideas and refining them. And so to that end, I think ChatGPT can really help kids kind of spitball or have a half thought and try something, run it through the machine, see what they get back, see if it's any good. No, I don't like that. I do like the kind of, I feel like it's like an imagination, a vitamin or something, and it's not going to replace their thinking, but it might, especially for that kid who can't really get started. I can see that being a huge help to the child that is just staring into the abyss of the white document and doesn't know, even can't get the brainstorming thing off the ground. So those are some of my concerns and places where I feel excited. I do think it has the potential to take some of just the small like admin stuff off my plate. For instance, I don't do enough vocabulary instruction, not because I don't care about it, but it's just not a lot of instructional bang for your buck, because you have to get the list of words from the text, type it out, make sure you have the right definition, give a sentence with an example of the word used correctly, et cetera, hyperlink it, upload the PDF. I mean, it's 7 steps to teach 20 words and for a 20-minute quiz. It's not a great use of class time, in my opinion. So the ChatGPT, I use a tool called Brisk that has helped me like quickly round up some vocabulary and turn it into a list of definitions that I can then check against the internet, and sure enough, these are accurate definitions. So something like that, right off my plate. Long term, I could also see AI helping me comb through lots of student essays and look for broad patterns, like what's the sentence complexity? Are these folks using semicolons correctly? Are they using verbs and nouns and syntactical structures that are at their grade level or above or way lower? Like who are my trouble spots that I have to go and maybe reteach a concept to? So I think that I'm not worried about kind of automating that part of my job. I think that would maybe make me more accurate as an evaluator. To your point, give better feedback. Only other concern I have seen students use it I have suspected students have used it. I've had extremely uncomfortable conversations with the kid who either says, yes, okay, fine, I did use it, tears, or no, I definitely did not. And now I have this terrible feeling that I've burned a bridge with the student and maybe, cost something in terms of our trust with each other. So that's been very, very dicey. And I look forward to there being a more universal set of ethical recommendations for the use of this stuff, because I think we're in the wild west here of what's okay and what isn't. And the other thing, I do wonder if the weaker student will use it, not necessarily totally unethically, but accidentally use it clumsily. Produce some piece of writing they don't understand, submit it, and then you say, well, this is not even remotely you, because you're nowhere in this document. And then how do you proceed? And now the kid has a knock against them because they got caught, using this workaround. So for me, there's a lot more that I need to learn to teach the kids how to use it ethically and helpfully. And that's it for now. I mean, that's a lot. I said a lot. Whoops, long-winded.
I would like to say she said she was going to say less, which makes me feel better. Okay, so we're going to go back to the students at the end. And so we're talking about this idea of what it would take you to, like, what do we need to do to help you? Like, you have parents here, you have teachers, you have leaders. I think it's interesting that you haven't used it as much and you have at the end, but like, what do we need to give you to be able to use these tools, knowing that you're most likely going to have to use them when you get out of high school? Want to start with?
So I think first it would be good to give a little context as to why Nikki and I don't use it, because we have a little anecdote to tell, sort of about why we feel almost guilty about using ChatGPT. So in the spring of last year, our English teacher approached our class and she was like, okay, everyone, I need you all to pick 4 students here that are going to randomly submit an essay using ChatGPT at some point in the year and not tell me, to see if she could catch us doing it. So she went out of the room, and Nikki and I were the students chosen by our class to submit an essay using ChatGPT. So when the time came, we were like, okay, we're going to do this. So the first thing we did was we wrote the actual essay ourselves, because we were going to submit the ChatGPT version, but then we would admit that we'd use ChatGPT and share our actual version. So we wrote our regular version, and that went fine. And then we turned to ChatGPT, and we were like, okay, it's time for this. So we were specifically given instructions to not edit that essay. We had to submit it directly from ChatGPT, which meant we needed a good essay from ChatGPT that would be believable. So we spent a lot of time working with ChatGPT. In fact, longer than we spent writing the actual essay. We were just sitting at the computer like, okay, we need this to be believable. We were rephrasing our prompts. Because it was a comparative analysis paper, we had to figure out how to feed it the interviews that we had done to analyze it accurately. And it was just a huge learning curve for us, because we didn't know how to feed it interviews. We didn't know how to make it sound like us. So after lots of trial and error, in fact, days of working with ChatGPT, we were able to produce a piece that we thought would be believable enough for our teacher to think that we wrote it ourselves.
And so we turned that in, and our teacher would hold these bi-weekly essay meetings where we would go over our essay so that she can give us feedback. So at our next meeting, we were standing at the front of the class with her, and she opens our essay, and we're like, okay, she's going to start reading it. So she starts reading it, and she's like, wow, this is really good. Did you guys write this yourselves? We're like, yeah. And she's like, did you guys use ChatGPT? We're like, what? No. And like, we're really bad liars. So we were like kicking each other and everything. It was bad. But, and then she's like, okay, but did you get help from your parents? We were like, a little. I mean, they just like read it over. That's it. And so then she continues to read it, and she's giving us feedback on something that we didn't even write. And she was putting so much time and effort into that. So we started feeling bad. And so we're like, when do we tell her? When do we tell her? And so then when she was about maybe halfway through the essay, we were like, we used ChatGPT. And do you want to know her reaction?
She was in absolute shock. Like, she could not believe it. She kept questioning us. She was like, are you sure? Are you sure you're not lying to me now? And then once we like once she was solid that we had in fact used ChatGPT, she ran out of the classroom. She just went to the nearest teacher. She was like, "Oh my gosh, my students submitted an essay with ChatGPT, lied to my face about it. When I asked them about it, they said no, and I believed them. And I almost completely graded this essay that was written by ChatGPT." And she was in just utter shock. She came back. She was just like, "Oh my gosh, did you guys actually do that?" And we're like, "Yes." And I don't know, we kept talking about this for days and days because she was in shock for such a long time because she didn't catch it, and it could have, any student could have done that and she might have not caught it. Like just in our scenario, we admitted it to her because that was what we were tasked with doing. But who's to say that other students haven't done the same thing and just haven't admitted it? And it's,
produce an essay with multiple days, critical thinking. You said learning curve. You said learning about your evidence and up. That itself is probably significantly more learning without the guilt than the comparative essay was. And so I think there is a question here that we need to think about of like how we actually get to a place that is coming soon where the essay actually shifts from a 5-paragraph essay. Sorry, I'm not that. But anyway.
Could you remind me of what like support on AI? For me, I never really needed that much because I just sort of like I do like a little bit of coding, so that means I'm on Google 24/7 trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, and that means that I sort of already had the skill set needed to talk to an AI and to let it give me what I needed it to give me. And for that was never really a struggle, but something that might be useful that schools can do for, I think, all of the students is sort of destigmatize the use of AI and how it's terrible to use and it's sort of useless. Because it is incredibly useful. And like some things like the school even like blocking ChatGPT on our computers, like why do that? Because if you're not using AI properly, it's pretty hard to, it's pretty hard not, if you're not using it properly, it's pretty easy to get caught. And if you get caught, like, people will know. And if people know, people will not try and do the bad thing, which is plagiarize from ChatGPT. And in my opinion, it being blocked from the school is limiting a lot of things that students can do because students in the high school, especially juniors and seniors, they have free blocks where they want to do other work. Maybe they're brainstorming other projects, and maybe the only device they have is the Chromebook that is given to them by the school. And they are not able to use the tools that is being offered that they can use besides school. Yeah. Oh, really? Ooh. Swear, just last week.
Should have been unblocked a week ago, so that maybe there's, anyway, that's a text.
Awesome. But no, thank you. Okay, so we're going to just do, sorry, I didn't use the microphone. That was bad of me. We're going to ask the two teachers to be slightly more concise. But also, I'm going to ask you the same question. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ask you guys to ask us questions, okay? So we have a half an hour that's open forum for everyone. So I know we have the Mentimeter. I know we also have a list. But if you have questions, and if you're students, you can ask questions too. But if you want to take that time right now and start noodling on it, please do so. And then I'm going to ask you the same thing. So let's talk about a time maybe when you thought you had an AI-generated piece and not, and like what happened. And then what do you need as a teacher from the students, from teachers, from you have your leadership right here, but what would be good for you to have to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Okay, a couple of things. I wished in the moment that I had a policy in front of me and some language for, kind of admitting that, okay, ChatGPT is out there, and I know kids at least look at it and they maybe refer to it. Whether or not they replicate it and give it to me is another thing. So I wish I had a policy I could just kind of point to where the line is between ethical use and turning in something you didn't write. And without that, I felt like I didn't really have much of a standard to rely on. And the second thing I think I would like to be able to do is, I think I have tacit permission to do this in class. Maybe Mr. Baker thinks otherwise. Well, just tacit permission to show them what it can do and weave it into a lesson in a way that models for them reasonable use. Those two things would help me a lot.
I had a student. It was just like obvious that it was just so obvious, and it was this like 5-minute back and forth of me just being like and they weren't like admitting it, and so I just went like, and then they were like, I don't know, I did that, and I was like, well, let's look at. I have records of the last 7 years of doing this assignment. This is what they typically look like. And it was just super awkward, and I hate it, and it's like the least enjoyable part of the job. I am super interested in just trying to create learning experiences where like you just can't cheat. Like there's just no cheating. There's no opportunity for it because they seem super meaningful. And you know, when it comes to like a take-home essay, it's like you know, let's just do it in class or something like that, like brand new. And I don't know, like it's weird because if you give a student like, oh, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z, they could very easily just be like, well, we're going to go home and look up X, Y, and Z, memorize what ChatGPT said, and then do it in class. So I'm really interested in my school learning community, really trying to like thinking with maybe like 22nd century mindset about what learning, like what a really awesome in-person learning experience looks like, and changing the landscape of like what we do, and so that we just don't even have to, like, we just really use GPT as like a way to build information to apply it. I don't know if that's still foggy, but I mean, this stuff is like 5 seconds old, you know. Anyway.
Great. And I just want to say thank you to our panel. And if you do have questions for the teachers and the students, it's for everybody. But I think, Andrew, how are we doing this part?
Well, I have some that I can give you, or I can run around with the microphone.
How are people feeling? Does anybody have a burning question? Or do we want to do stuff?
Yeah, we call this doing Phil Donahue in our faculty meetings, where I run around and I give people the microphone. And just to respond to our teachers, two things. Yes, you have permission. I've even received parent emails where like so and so said they did a lesson plan on ChatGPT, and are you going to punish them? And I write back, I say no. I won't be doing that. I think the teacher was open and honest about it, and as long as the teacher gives students permission to be using it in class, then you would use it. And in terms of the policy, I think that we were in a place where we were worried about writing a policy about something that we didn't understand. So, but after today, I think we are in a better place with that. So, how about I have a couple of questions, and then I can run around like Phil Donahue. But the first, maybe an overriding one, since we have so many caregivers in the audience, how can caregivers, parents, how can they monitor appropriate use or encourage appropriate use or even know if appropriate use is going on at home? They want to understand how they would weigh into that.
Okay, so GPT-4 is $20 a month, which is not inexpensive, but it is the best on the market, and you could use it. Like, so you as adults and your jobs. The best thing about it is it has memory. You can actually check and see what's been done. And so I would suggest getting a GPT-4 potentially and just sharing it with your student. And so they have access to it, and it's something that if you wanted to go and look and have conversations about appropriate use, you do, but you're also equipping your student with the best model, which is going to make a difference. GPT 3.5 has an IQ of around 90, and whereas GPT-4 is closer to 135. So it is a big difference, and it does a lot of things like data analysis. It can make imagery, the robotics. So if you have a robotics question, you can upload a picture of your robotics circuit that's not working and get feedback on how to fix it. So if you're a parent that's being asked this and you're like, I don't know, like now you can. And so that's one way. I think modeling and having real conversations with your students about what cheating is today is very important. Kids understand sometimes when something is busy work, sometimes. but 95% of it, they don't. It feels like busy work, but it's not. Okay, it's foundational. It's important for fundamental skill building. So they're not good actors. You guys are not good actors on that, okay? But sometimes you are. And so the fact that you lump it together as if the same thing that is boring is always not important is not real. So have model conversations about appropriate or inappropriate use and hold your students to a standard. Okay? There was one teacher we worked with and that said if you put someone's name or your parent's name, so let's say that, Pat, for example, I have ChatGPT is going to help me brainstorm. Pat's going to help me brainstorm. ChatGPT is going to do my homework. Pat's going to do my homework, or my dad is going to do my homework. It's very easy to understand where the ethical line is. But the thing is, you cannot expect the students are not touching these tools, both in the sense of schoolwork, but things like Snapchat AI, Character AI, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, Roblox, all have AI tools that are run by ChatGPT in the background. So whether you are actively having these conversations or not, this is happening. And so it's just really important to normalize it, have a conversation, and then set guidelines, and then provide the best tools. That would be my answer.
I would add, tell me what you think of this, Amanda. I would say if your child is using ChatGPT to generate an idea for a draft of a paper or test some of their own prose and have ChatGPT like help them refine it or something, that a parent has eyes on the piece of writing. If the child has any questions about, does this look like, is this any good? The parent might say, oh, you used the word circumnavigate and felicitous. That doesn't really sound like you. So maybe the parent can also be a voice check for the child to say, like, listen, I know this tool is robust, but if this doesn't sound like you can go back to the drawing board and put more of yourself in this piece of writing. I think that would be a huge skill for them to learn.
Absolutely. So Delve is making a comeback. A lot of Delves in ChatGPT responses. So there are a lot of big vocabulary that's being used. Delve, DLVE, is very popular in ChatGPT responses. No, I think that's great. But I think, again, it's partnership. It's actually having rich discussions with your students about what they're doing. But also, one of the funniest things that I've seen so far is I was in Kansas City last week, and a fourth grader came to class with a ChatGPT, and I wrote a book. And it came in, and it had an illustration. He'd actually stapled it together, but then it was written like he was 90 years old. It had chapters, and he was so proud of it, right? And the teacher took a bit of issue with the fact it said by Dale and not by Dale and Chat. It was a GPT story, but he authored it. Does that make sense? But I was like, would it have been different if he said by Dale and ChatGPT? Would that have made you feel better? Because this kid was so creative. That there are these opportunities to find ways in which you encourage that creativity, but you are also a backstop. We know developmentally that we need to be backstops for our students in appropriate and inappropriate uses. And it's also really cool for you, too, to be able to now actually, you don't have to be an expert in 10th grade math anymore or 10th grade biology, but you can help them in ways you've never been able to before because ChatGPT can be that expert that you then mediate and support.
Okay, before I do the Phil Donahue thing, I will combine two questions that we got from the Mentimeter together, and this is going to step a little bit outside of the conversation in that it's not going to be about education specifically, but what are some of the social uses, maybe outside of education, for AI that you think are useful, and how can we combat anti-AI sentiment, and would that be a way of maybe doing that?
Okay. Oops, sorry. Anecdote time. I know a 15-year-old who built a company called AceFlow that is an intelligent tutor with AI that has 1 million student users. He asked me a question. He said, how do I be a CEO and a 15-year-old? And I said, I don't know. But this is so cool. This is the time where you can create with technology like never before. If you have a passion, if you care about something, you can create a chatbot. You can create a website right now by drawing on a piece of paper and then uploading it to Figma or GPT-4. a front end of a website. It won't be beautiful, but it's a lot easier than hiring someone to build you a website. Okay. So I think that's number one. The creativity aspect of this is enormous. You have new ideas. We have kids that can now do science fair projects where it could be a new protein or it could be a new approach. That's number one. Number two is that a lot of students, there is a mental health crisis. We know this. There's social isolation. I think that from what I've heard, there's a perfectionism question as well, that we want to be perfect. It's a high pressure environment in this room, in this school. And so we have that happening. And there are tools that are being used, whether appropriately or not, because they are very new, around mental health and well-being. Students asking for advice, having a conversation. For example, I asked about character AI. I think one person had used it. Is that the average user is between 16 and 24, and they spend about 2 hours using it. And it's just a way to like interact with famous people, fake famous people, or just a chatbot you make that could be a friend. So I think there's questions about how that could impact students in terms of their social emotional growth and something called artificial intimacy. We have to be careful, but we know that's happening. So it's worth a conversation. But also we are going to see ChatGPT and other tools infused into every part of our lives. Your toaster might talk to you at one point. I don't know. We talk about toasters. I got a toaster. I live in New York City in a new apartment, and I got very excited to have a toaster. And now it's my example. But realistically, like your hardware and your TV can tell you it needs to be, like, here's a great show. Your refrigerator can tell you you're running out of milk. These are real things, okay? And so, again, the infusing of this across our lives is going to be more and more possible. And it makes it both creative, but also something in which that literacy component, that AI literacy component, is more and more important.
Yeah. That's how Phil did it. That's you would, yeah. No, you don't have to.
So as I listened to everyone speaking, one of the things I noticed was it feels like we need to revise what we expect students to be learning in high school and what the expectations are. If we no longer think that generative creativity, in the sense of coming up with ideas, is something that we want them to learn and that we can outsource to ChatGPT, what are the things we care about? And one of my fears is, honestly, I still think, and this is me being old-fashioned, that learning to write an essay, a long-form essay, is really an important skill. And I'm starting to see hints of, and I just heard a little hint of it earlier, of like sending the take-home essay, maybe we can't do it anymore because we can't trust it. And I would hate for that to happen. So I have a lot of fear. So there's a piece of how do we combat that, but also how do we help our educators revise, rethink sort of, okay, what are the important skills? Because there probably are some that we can outsource and we're comfortable with. But that's a hard conversation to have.
Okay. Patrick would like to respond.
I don't think we should murder the long form essay. Nothing has organized, helped me develop an organized mind than creating that. I just, on my end of the room, it just seems like everything you're saying. Like, is there a way to maintain, if the primary skill of writing the long form essay is to develop an organized mind who knows how to present information in a way, if that's the goal, then are there new ways? And that creating something new doesn't necessarily mean throwing it out, but are there ways that we can kind of use this tool to deal with the nitty gritty that we need in order to write the long form essay, but also get to that skill of developing an organized mind? I do, on my end, in the teaching side of the room, human behavior is not. It can be sometimes really disillusioning in what you see. Like I went into another classroom just to get some highlighters for my students, and I opened the door, and the door I went into put me in the back of the room. Students were like writing an essay. The kid had his cell phone right there on the back side of his computer, and it was clearly just using GPT. I was like, what? Like, I just turned my back and then it's there. And so it's like, man, like, how do you deal with that? It's just, and it's so at the fingertips of young people. And it's just like, I want to have an idealistic, rosy version of human beings and especially young people. But a decade on of teaching has, maybe not pounded it out of me. It's just like I'm trying to be more realistic and like thinking like, what is the temptation of a 15-year-old to at their fingertips to have this essay completed and to be like, I will not do it. Like I'm as a betting person, I'm just really and I'm just sort of thinking, are there ways in which we can keep the skill of the long form of an organized mind? And just acknowledge those as realities. The noble student is wonderful, but I worry about their population.
Thank you, Pat. I totally I know what you mean, and one of the things I think they get from the long form essay that I'm wondering where's the home for this in the modern educational landscape is the way essay writing necessitates deep focus, on an uncomfortable degree of focus. And there is a lot to be said about just almost like the athletic event that is putting forth the intellectual out, like you've got to burn some intellectual calories to create an interesting essay. And that it feels like an achievement, and it is an achievement. And so that's sort of the missing piece for me right now too. It's like I believe in the essay, I believe in what it does for the mind, and there is something so important about the experience of writing one. It's a question for me too, I guess. Yeah.
Like just an idea that comes to mind, like everything writing is it's an ancient craft of our species. It's excellent. But in my why can't there be like, all right, so on Wednesdays we have like these 2.5-hour classes where you're with the teacher in the room and you're writing, you're doing the athletic energy of putting your thinking into written form. Those are the types of things that I'm just sort of thinking kind of probably need to evolve with the reality of cheating.
Just really quickly, who in here has been asked to write a 5-paragraph essay out of high school? Okay, no, but a 5-paragraph essay where it has this is okay. Yeah. Okay. But I'm going to tell you right now that the way that we teach is a construct. And one of the things that's so important is that constructs can be changed. And so when we talk about long form essays, we talk about thinking, we're talking about a process that leads to skills. And the idea that we might have to change the process and the product is a very important conversation. And because the graphing calculator is not a good example and I don't like to use it, but it did change the way that we do math in really significant ways. And it doesn't mean that now we force kids 2.5 hours to do sine and cosine. Well, no, but there is a question about cognitive load as well, of putting pressure on students to spend that time because we don't have a better answer yet. We need to come to a better answer. And one of the best ways to do that is to focus on process over product and to get to those same skills in meaningful ways that actually meet the moment. And it doesn't mean it's going to happen right away and not without enormous support. These teachers are not asked and should not be asked to figure out what that is. To experiment, yes, and to find out and to work with students to identify what that looks like. But we do need to meet the moment. And that does mean that a long form essay will change. It will have to.
Yes, I will get you. So that question actually had 2 parts. I actually wanted to respond to the second part, which was about generating ideas and whether that was something that was going to be done away with through this technology. As people know who read my newsletter this year, Mr. Milley and I and administrators have made an effort to be in classrooms a lot and to see what's going on in classrooms. I was in an art teacher's classroom, a new art teacher, Paul Belenke, here at the school, and he had a really interesting exercise wherein he had students doing a sort of a 4 corners chart with markers of a who, what, when, where, why of an idea for a construct art. And they were doing all that generation, but then in an instant they could play around with those ideas by making images from the things they had selected. So they were still doing the intellectual work of coming up with the possibilities, but then what the technology was allowing them to do was really quickly play around with them and see what it would look like, right? So it would be like penguins at Costco, like shopping for Thanksgiving or something like that, right? And then they could swap the ideas out really fast and see which one was the funniest or had the most purchase or something like that. And so they were still doing that idea generation. It's just that they could play around and do it faster. So I thought that was maybe a good example of like the technology doesn't have to replace the idea generation. And there may be times wherein actually it would be great to let the technology do it up front, and then in other cases where it's doing it on the back end.
I just wanted to return to your anecdote, which I thought was really interesting. I was wondering, so I was listening to that and just very excited about how you were learning and all the ways that you were applying. It sounded like your essay writing skills, you had to use those to craft a good essay still. So I was wondering if you could maybe just talk a little bit about how, so I'm like a B- essay writer, right? I bet you could out chat GPT me because of your essay writing chops. We're both using the same tool. I bet you can still craft something better. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how you use those skills that you learned with a tool.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the comparison that Amanda gave with the calculator. So say you're in math class, right? You're not gonna, say you're in a second grade math class. You're not going to give a second grader a calculator and say, okay, use this to add 2 plus 6. You teach them how to add 2 plus 6 on paper. And then when they get to high school, you're like, okay, now you can use your calculator to write 2 plus 6 because you conceptually understand how adding 2 plus 6 works. And now you can go farther in your math journey and you can use your calculator to aid your math knowledge and math problem solving. So it's almost the same thing when it comes to writing an essay, right? If I know how to write an essay on my own, then I know what to ask of ChatGPT to get a quality essay. If I didn't know how to write an essay on my own, I wouldn't know if ChatGPT's essay was good. I would just be like, oh, look at this nice piece of writing. Like, I don't know if it's good or not. So I guess having that knowledge of how to write an essay helps me understand how I can use ChatGPT to enhance my essay writing. But that only comes with having knowledge of how to write an essay, which is so essential. And I also want to go back to Mr. Flynn's take-home essay assignment, right? When I got this assignment, I didn't see it as just like, oh, essay. I was like, okay, here is an opportunity for me to practice the writing skills that I've learned in Mr. Flynn's class. I'm going to use this opportunity to help me understand how I can improve my writing in the future. I'm not going to just feed it to ChatGPT and like have it write it for me because that's not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. So I approached the essay in that way because I knew if I were to give ChatGPT the ability to write my entire essay, I would be losing my own personal voice. And I feel like that is one major reason why I don't want to use ChatGPT, because I don't want to lose my own voice and I value my own perspective, because a machine can't replace my perspective. Only I know my perspective. And we were talking about the danger of a single story in Mr. Flynn's class. When we give AI the power to write for us, we're losing all the human stories. The machine is just writing for us. And I think it's so important to maintain that sense of humanity in what we do. We can't have AI just replace everything because we can't have it replace us because we're important as humans. So we are. So yeah, so that's just the perspective that thank you. Yeah. So that's just the perspective that I have going into ChatGPT. I want to use it to aid my own writing. I don't want it to replace my writing. And the more I understand how to write, the better I can use that tool to enhance what I'm doing.
So going back to what Tara was saying about the whole 2 plus 6 thing, I think it's really hard with the younger generation because they haven't learned these skills yet. And like Tara was saying, once we do learn these skills, then it becomes like, okay, maybe I can use ChatGPT to help me in the future. But if you don't have that foundation, it's really, you're not getting anything really out of it. And so also with going back to our anecdote, we were trying not to get caught with using ChatGPT. Like that was the point of the whole experiment. So, and we knew what our own writing looked like, which was sort of like what Tara was saying. And so we knew, that's why we kept prompting ChatGPT, because we needed it to sound like something that we would actually write, not something like too fancy or like too oversimplified. And so like Tara was saying, similarly, I don't want ChatGPT to take away my voice because I value my own voice. And I think we really have to learn how to use ChatGPT responsibly, because you're never going to really stop students from using it, because especially high schoolers, if they have an easy way to get out of something, they will do it. But we have to learn how to use it responsibly. So I think that's something I've really learned.
So this is why we include students on a panel. And the reason being is that when they have a deep experience with using it, they understand the ethical lens, okay? And I see that over and over again. It doesn't matter if it's, South Brooklyn High School with metal detectors or a affluent neighborhood. But when you use it, you start to see the levels in which it can help or hurt or replace. And I think that's why education, AI literacy for everyone is the number one thing we can do right now to ensure that those voices are real, because Grammarly Go right now has a your voice, where it becomes your voice. And that's something that that's what it's called. And so I think that this is an opportunity to actually teach kids the deep levels of good and bad by experiencing it. And then we have a chance that we have a future world in which voice will still be prioritized. And there'll still be a lot of space for long form essay writing, or in the end, maybe it's just like your robot, your robot is your expression and you're teaching it how to do something in meaningful, deep cognitive ways.
All right, Mr. Amelia wanted to have the last question, I think, probably. Well, I think it's going to be Mr. Amelia. We're very close to the end. Okay. You okay with that, Dan?
Andrew, Amanda, thank you. Just context, I do have a 12th grader and an 8th grader here in the Lexington Public Schools, but I'm also the head of school at a local independent school that works with secondary school students. And I've been in the work for 30 years now. In those 30 years, as new technologies have continued to emerge over and over and over and over again, my greatest challenge as an educational leader has been how to frame professional development to be proactive and help my team of teachers get ahead rather than feeling that they're always reactive and behind. And as parents, we have 7,000 students in the Lexington Public Schools, 2,300 right here on this campus. To ask our parents to take on the role of understanding and teaching this tool as a force of good rather than evil is going to be a Herculean effort. So I look at Andrew and I look at Amanda coming in and I think about the PD work you did this afternoon, and I kind of ask myself, so in terms of the action item, like how do we move forward to help arm our faculty to be the best version of educators they can to help our students, because so many of us aren't capable or competent or just scared to take on the role of the ethical implications of developing these young leaders. So it's more of an institutional question, Andrew, about where do we go from here?
So I think that question was directed our way, but also to the teachers as well. So to be honest about that, today was part of that. Today was to try to get a bunch of faculty together to, first of all, just understand what it is, what it can do, what it can't do. We learned a lot. We talked about myth versus fact this afternoon, right? We started to get people on the same page. I think we're now closer to being able to think about what our policies would be. If you're asking me right now, I think a big part of the policy has to be everyone needs to go into it understanding what is or what is not acceptable, right? But I think what we need to get away from is having some sort of a view that in all contexts or all settings, something is going to be acceptable or unacceptable. Like that email I received from the parent saying, did you know that the teacher used this to create a lesson? And I was like, well, the teacher was very upfront about it. They said that the lesson was created through this model. And so I think a lot of our policies are going to have to be around making it clear, probably on a unit by unit, lesson by lesson, assignment by assignment basis, what it is or isn't acceptable. And I think in terms of guiding that, we need to think about some of the things the teachers have been talking about here. What's the skill we're assessing in this case? And if the skill we're assessing in this case isn't, in fact, ChatGPT specific, well, maybe it could be used in that context. But if ChatGPT is a substitute for that skill that we're trying to assess, maybe that's a case wherein we're not going to use it. But I think we need a nimble policy, and I think we need more time to discuss it. But I am excited too, and that sort of that Mentimeter that we had, and I was very excited by what you were sharing in that. It does seem like there's this possibility for differentiation or even for students to be using it at home. I'm trying to imagine, I struggled with physics. I struggled with calculus. If I had had that at home to be able to say, explain the mean value theorem to me in basic language, like this, I might have understood it better. And so it does seem like there's a possibility there for it to also be a teaching tool and a differentiation tool. So I think we just have to think really explicitly about when it's appropriate, why it's appropriate, and to be clear with students and teachers about that, but not to have a one-size-fits-all, like it's always inappropriate or it's always appropriate. So, and I really appreciate what you said about the 30-year thing too, because it's like when I think back, I got to imagine that when I was in middle school and we were sitting in front of those Apple IIe computers, there were teachers down in the teacher room saying that's a fad, don't pay attention to it, it's gonna go away, right? They were. And so that's just the way that it is. So I think we're trying to lean into it. And I'm told we may not be on the forefront or the first, but we're doing pretty good. We're accepting it. We're in the grand scheme of things. Is that true, Amanda?
Yeah. I work literally all over the world. I think that I have trained more teachers and leaders on generative AI than anyone at this stage, at least English language speaking. And the vast majority of schools have not done anything, or districts for that matter. So even there's the idea of too early or too late for technology, we're still in the too early stage because I can't actually give you 5 tools or 5 things that are safe. But this moment and doing this work and giving the opportunity for everyone in that room, including 65-year-old teachers who probably were like, what is this thing? All used it to build a rubric. They used it to think about their practice. We gave a challenge to go try it out. And so I think that that's a great way to just demystify this because no one left that room not knowing what it is and what it isn't and trying to have one commitment to using it to make their practice better so they can make their teaching better.
So I'm looking at the time. Well, you raised your hand though, and you did say something really great before though. So I'm going to pass the mic off.
Okay.
You made me proud.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I just wanted to offer my student perspective on this. I think we're at a very crucial time right now where AI hasn't completely taken over. So we're at this place where we can shape it to be what we want it to be. And for me as a student, like I mentioned before, I don't really use AI. And part of that is because of the way my teachers are acting about it. And I just want to say I haven't had a single teacher that has gone over their AI policies in class thoroughly. And I feel like if my teachers were to do that, I would understand what they consider to be an acceptable use of AI. Because just considering of the context of the school that I'm in right now, a lot of students here are very grade focused, right? So I don't want to use ChatGPT in a way that my teacher would consider wrong, because I don't want to get in trouble for it or have my grade be impacted by it. And it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take. So I feel like if my teachers were a little more open about it and they had those sorts of conversations, I might be more open to using AI because it is a tool that I see as valuable. And it is something that I would want to use to my advantage because it has a lot of things that it can offer to me. But if my teacher doesn't think it's okay, then I'm going to I don't know, they have the authority in the situation in my opinion, and they have the power over my grade. And that's valuable to me because it affects my future. So I'm not gonna take that risk. So that's one major reason to me. And then also I have a fear of getting in trouble. I don't want to have that awkward like you were saying, you've had to approach students. I've had friends that have been approached and it's terrifying. They've broken down in class. They've been like, oh my God, my teacher just emailed me and they thought that I used ChatGPT. My academic career is over. I don't want to be in that position on my own. And so I think there's also a lot of education that needs to happen on the teacher side. How should we approach students? How do we do this in a non-accusatory manner? Because like Amanda mentioned before, AI detectors don't work. A lot of teachers go off of those. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't work. So like we mentioned before, I mean, actually, I don't know if we mentioned this, Nikki and I, we presented at a professional development event, Lexington Learns Together. And one thing that we brought up was how should we approach students? And one thing we mentioned was having like a standardized email template saying like, oh, here's a standardized email. I sort of suspected that you used AI, but I don't want to target you, but I'm just letting you know, like maybe we can have this conversation. And I feel like we just need to shift the blame, I guess, off the student, because your accusation has no grounds in anything, right? You just suspect that a student might be using AI. But I feel like a lot of students take it personally when their teacher's like, oh, you used AI, and now they think they're on the teacher's bad side. I have a lot of friends who don't like teachers anymore because they accuse them of using AI, and they're like, well, I'm not friends with this teacher anymore. I don't want to talk to them anymore. I don't want to be in their class. So it's almost starting to divide students and teachers in a way, just from what I've been seeing. So I feel like, I don't know, this is sort of just a wake-up call that we need. Like, we need to create some sort of rules and regulations about this before it divides us. Because, AI is going to stick around. It's only going to grow more powerful, so we need to harness it while we're at this very special moment in time when we can do so.
So I want to thank Amanda and all of our panelists for coming out. I know Amanda has to catch a flight at the airport soon. So what I'm hoping is that today is kicking off a conversation. Some of the things we're talking about, I certainly feel like maybe I'm in a much better place to start talking about these policies, maybe more Lexington Learns Together type sessions around this, where we're talking about the best and highest uses of the technology versus the not so great uses of the technology. And again, I really want to thank the students. I want to thank our staff, and I want to thank Amanda for coming out this evening. And thank the LEF for helping to make this evening happen fiscally. Thank you.